Okay, dokie. All right. Welcome to our next chapter of Flute Espresso. And thank you so much to Flute Specialists for hosting us today. We are so excited to be able to sit down with rock star and amazing haired Lindsey Goodman. Lindsey Goodman is the principal flute of the West Virginia Symphony Orchestra. So she's got a lot of orchestral wisdom and genius in there. She's also a recording artist with Parma Recordings and a founding member of Pandemonium 4, a flute quartet. Lindsey, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Alyssa, and thank you to Flute Specialists for hosting.
So the real question on everybody's mind is, what are you drinking?
I have to admit I'm fairly boring today. I'm currently on a juice cleanse, so this is plain old water. So
Nice, awesome. I respect that. That's probably healthier than what I've done, which is I'm on cup of coffee number 2. So by the end, we might be going fast.
no problem.
So if you don't mind, we'd love to just chat with you a little bit about you and get to know you better as a person and as an artist. So I kind of creeped on your Facebook photos, and I've seen it looks like you are really enjoying or have been able to spend some good time doing non-flute related things in the last handful of months. I really went back into your posts. So I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about you besides being a flutist. Like, what do you enjoy? What are some passions you have outside of flute?
Absolutely. Well, every musician, every flutist, every artist is at their core an actual human. So for me, my non-music passions include running. I'm a distance runner, so since the social distancing past 6 months, I've run 2 half marathons, and I'm getting ready to run my longest run ever, which will be a 15 miler in about 10 days. So that's been really fun to have some extra time to be able to get outside and challenge my body. I think as flutists, we think of ourselves as small muscle athletes. And so it's wonderful to be a big muscle, a large muscle athlete as well. Great for the cardiovascular system. I also have been cooking a ton. My husband and I here staying at home are very conscious of the pandemic. So we've really limited all of our takeout and obviously not going to restaurants. So it's been really fun, actually. I've pretty much cooked every meal we've had, 3 meals a day for 6 months, and trying so many new recipes. I'm vegan, so I really like to find ways to like experiment with new flavors and foods and cuisines. And other than that, here at home, I've Marie Kondoed my house from top to bottom. Every single surface has been spick and spanned and organized, and it feels like a lovely place to spend time.
That's awesome. Very cool. So I'll be over for dinner later, if you don't mind, if you could just take one more.
Come on, it's shepherd's pie tonight. Come on over.
That sounds good. Especially sounds good after a long distance run. So can I just ask out of curiosity, about how long does it take somebody to run 15 miles? Because I can tell you I've never done that or anything close to it.
Well, I'm not super fast. I have staying power, but I'm not a speed demon. So I'm assuming that it will take me about 3 hours to run 15 miles.
I think that is so impressive. I don't think I could run 3 hours straight if my life depended on it. So power to you. I think that's very cool.
I wouldn't recommend just leaving your door and trying it. I would recommend training up to it.
Yes, I would say you're probably quite right. Um, so if you don't mind, we'd love to know a little bit more about kind of your educational background, your flute background. Could you tell us a little bit, like how old were you when you began playing the flute, and who have your primary teachers been?
Absolutely. So I started formal flute study when I was 10. This was in the 5th grade. I am a proud product of public school music education. Advocate for it in every corner of our country, dear friends. And so my first flute teacher was Catherine Umble, who teaches at Youngstown State University in Ohio. And then after that, I studied with Lori Turk, a truly wonderful flutist who now lives down in the Carolinas. From there, I did my undergrad at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, and I studied with then the principal flutist of the Pittsburgh Symphony, the wonderful, often imitated, never duplicated Robert Langevin. And after that, I did my master's at Northwestern University with the living legend, Walford Kujala, and then went back for 1 year to study with Robert again at the Manhattan School of Music in New York for a specialized degree in orchestral performance. So I have been so lucky to have these two truly wonderful, legendary teachers really shaped me in my collegiate career.
That's amazing. I was going to say you have a very impressive flute lineage. That's really wonderful.
Yeah, I think about my teachers every single day. Every time I touch the flute, every time I teach, every time I perform, they are right there with me, and I am so lucky to have been shaped by those wonderful men.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And what a wonderful thing for them too to know they've had such a positive and lasting influence on somebody like you who is so successful. That's fantastic.
Well, I think that all of us who teach really are looking to help the next generation, to make them into better flutists and better musicians, and especially having received such a wonderful education from those gentlemen, it's really my duty to go ahead and pass that along to the next generation as well.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, that's so sweet. I love that. So, just kind of learning a little bit more about you and your love of music. Can you tell us what drew you to the flute or music in general? You know, how did you fall in love with the instrument or how did you know, okay, this is my career?
Well, I am sitting here at my studio where I have several teaching aids. So I will pull down a teaching aid and say that in Harry Potter, they say that it's the wand that chooses the wizard. And in my case, it was the flute that chose me. My father had played the flute in high school, junior high and high school. And he actually studied with one of the founders of the National Flute Association. And in all of his travels as a young man living all across the United States, he only kept a few things. He had his car, which he still has to this day, this vintage MG, and his stereo, and his Gemeinhardt, his Gemeinhardt closed hold beginning flute. So then when my parents got married and I came into the world, my parents had a very sweet alternating bedtime schedule. So my mom would put me to bed one day and my dad would put me to bed the next day. And my mom, she has a lovely singing voice. Neither of my parents are musicians. They work normal folk jobs, muggle jobs. Uh, but my mom does have a beautiful singing voice, and so she would sing me all these lullabies to put me to sleep. And my dad, mm, not so much. So there's a fairly famous story in my family about my dad trying to sing me to sleep, and I evidently put my little hand on his mouth and said, "No, sing, daddy." So I guess everyone's a critic, right? Um, so my dad was trying to find different ways to interact with me at bedtime, and he still had his flute from high school. So he got it out, and the music he remembered, of course, he remembered his high school fight song and alma mater. And so he started playing flute to me at bedtime. And so really some of my first memories are of hearing the flute. And so I don't really remember learning how to make a sound. It was just sort of around, and I feel like at some point my dad gave me a head joint and said, blow on this. So I don't really truly remember a time when I couldn't make a sound on the flute. So there, it was in the house. It was something that was intriguing and magical to me. And so when it was time to actually start band in a public school music program, it just made sense that of course I was going to play the flute. And I started on my dad's Gemeinhardt, as so many of us do on those lovely instruments. And for my 40th birthday last year, my parents had it made into a lamp, which sits over in my living room. So it has gone through two Goodmans and now has a lamp life.
That's awesome. So having music and the flute has been part of your life as long as you can remember. I mean, this is just a part of you as much as anything else.
Absolutely. It really does feel that way, that I was as definitely meant to play that instrument, I guess.
That's beautiful. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Pardon me. So, if you don't mind, we were hoping to pick your brain and maybe try to get a little wisdom and advice out of you about flute stuff.
Of course.
Wonderful. So, one question that I just was curious about is when I was creeping on your Facebook, I noticed you have a lot of really great videos, recordings of you playing different etudes. And it seems to me, as far back as I stalked you, that you have been really staying active in your playing, even if we might not all have a lot of actual performance opportunities or audition opportunities or anything these days. So, I was just kind of wondering if you would be able to share any advice for music students or flutists in general, like on how to stay engaged with practice right now? How are you finding motivation and drive to practice even with our unusual year and our reduced performance outlets?
Right. These are really challenging times for performers and art workers of all kinds. Of course, we think very flute centric and very instrumental centric, but our theater friends, our ballet friends, our opera friends, all the technical people behind the scenes, it's a very hard time for all of us. Absolutely. So what I have done, my first official day of the new normal was Thursday, March 12th. And so on Friday, March 13th, I woke up and I'm like, I don't have anything to practice. And it was the first time in decades. I really don't remember a time that I wasn't preparing for some performance. Um, And I was like, "Oh my goodness, we have no idea how long this is gonna last. Maybe it's gonna be a couple of weeks." And I was like, "Well, I better not lose my edge. I better make sure that I'm really practicing because you need to come back better than ever." There's that old adage, you're either getting better or you're getting worse. And I definitely want to be on the getting better side of things. So I decided I would do something that I call the stay at home etude odyssey. So I got out my favorite book of etudes by Marcel Beach and dived in. So I've been doing a page of an etude every day. It's now over 6 months old that I've been doing the stay at home etude odyssey. I worked through Beach and Castored and the Anderson School of Virtuosity Opus 60 and the BAM caprices. Now I'm in the Demaz 24 etudes. And it's a really great thing. I, like so many of us, did a steady diet of etudes all the way through my education from fifth grade up until 2004 when I finished my final degree. And then I put myself on a diet of etudes when I was a young performer out in the world because I'm like, well, why would I stop doing that if it obviously works? And then at some point, maybe about 15 years ago, I just got so busy preparing for all the performances. There was always 4 or 5 sets of music on my stand that needed to be dealt with. And it just felt like there was no more time for etudes, which was sad, but necessary. And so I thought, well, this is the perfect time to do that. So yeah, I keep working on those daily, and it feels really good to say that I'm definitely a better flutist today than I was 6 months ago, and that feels really wonderful. Now, obviously, we have a lot fewer traditional performance opportunities than ever before. It's really up to us as creative 21st century flutists to come up with ways to perform, whether that's giving a front porch concert or a live stream, or as I often do, simply play for my dog. So whatever performing means, it's really important to have some sort of performance outlet that perhaps you're ideating and bringing into fruition yourself, and to have goals. um, I know a lot of people who took a nice long break over this time, and that's totally healthy. A lot of people, perhaps like me and like a lot of very busy students, really feel burnt out from this long haul of always practicing, always preparing, never having quite enough time. And so breaks were really necessary and healthy for some. And I will admit that there are plenty of days where all I do in my practicing in this time is my normal warm up of long tones, scales, technical work, and my etude. And, maybe that only takes an hour or 90 minutes. And maybe that's all I'm doing right now. So for me, that's quite a break, actually. To only do an hour or 90 minutes a day is quite a break. For others, that meant taking some real time with the instrument in the case. And I think, however we deal with it during this time, it's really important to give ourselves grace to honor where we are and to honor the way we're feeling, because all of us are going through this time with some sense of loss or anxiety or grief for what was, some expectancy, some hopefulness, but all of that should be reflected in our practicing. But at the end of the day, it really does come down to that adage. We're either getting better or we're getting worse. So if you're still one of those people who has the flute in the case, I really invite you to join me in the Stay-at-Home Etude Odyssey. Grab your favorite etude book. Come on, let's get started today, and I will be there to cheer you along the way to help you with your practice inspiration.
That's awesome. That's such a good and positive message. I really appreciate that perspective because just to be honest, in my own life, I took a break for a while, which for me meant playing a short amount of time. And then I didn't quite come to the realization and the clarity that you just said, but I did have the realization of, okay, so I don't have a deadline coming up right now, but I'm going to at some point. And what will I wish I had done? But I kind of love putting it in those very clear black and white terms. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. I mean that, and I think that's so true. Like that's a really good point. So I'm feeling motivated. I'm going to practice after this.
Me too.
So if you don't mind, I'd love to just talk to you a bit about orchestra stuff. So obviously you have had orchestral audition success, and that orchestral audition is something that can be a very big focus and source of anxiety or concern for a lot of people. So I was just wondering, do you have any things, any bits of advice that you might be able to share, things you learned from going through that say somebody who's a bit younger or hasn't taken many auditions might not know? Like, what are the little tricks of the trade or the little surprises that might be helpful to know for having a successful audition?
Right. So auditions are really beasts unto themselves, right? Playing an orchestral audition is not like playing a solo recital. It's not like playing in an orchestra. It's really its own entity. And I think that for people who are new to taking auditions, that's really something to learn, is what it's like to actually be good at taking auditions versus good at playing the flute or good at playing the excerpts or good at playing an orchestra. So just like it took you time to develop those skills and become excellent at all of those, it will take time to develop those skills and become excellent at taking auditions as well. I hear from so many flutists who go out for one of their first auditions and they feel really prepared. And then they come back and they're like, but when I was behind the screen in the room, all these things happened that never happen. And well, of course. The first time you played a concert, did it go exactly the way it went in your practice room? Of course not. So be where you are today and let's move forward from there. So most people find that they need to take a lot of auditions just to practice the skills. Practice what does it feel like to drive or travel to a new state or city or time zone, to find your way around that new space and to your hotel and find yourself some food and get up really early and maybe not be able to warm up because you're in a hotel and where you're supposed to do that, and then find your way to the hall and unfamiliar parking and all these people and everyone's playing so loud and fast. Oh my goodness. So to just learn how to get through all of those things to the point where you can actually walk on the stage and show what it is that you do and what makes you unique as an artist. So that's my first advice, is that the audition experience needs to be practiced. And it's an expensive thing to practice with all the travel and the fees, but give yourself time to understand that process. The other thing in terms of preparation, I would say, is that you're never truly prepared for an audition until you really understand each piece in terms of what it means within the orchestral catalog. So I see so many flutists who really know their excerpts and can play their flute excerpts. But if I ask them, who's accompanying you? What chords are underneath you? What beat pattern is the conductor doing right now? They haven't known those answers yet. So, especially now that we have the glory of video platforms, not just listening to recordings, though listening to recordings is so important, but actually watching performances. I can't tell you the number of times I have talked flutists through, well, what does the conductor actually do in Afternoon of a Faun? Well, there are hundreds of recordings. Go online and watch what the conductor does so you can understand how that works in case you make it to the finals and the conductor wants you to conduct you through it. You want to know already what that's like. So listening to recordings, watching videos, hearing a wide variety of orchestras and conductors and flutists do these in different styles, and doing a lot of score study. All of my orchestral parts are littered with notes about who I'm playing with and who I pass to and who my phrase comes from. Because so often as flutists, we default to what feels good on our instrument. Whereas if you're in unison with the clarinet, won't that inform your vibrato choice or your color or even your pitch tendencies? And if you're going for a principal flute job, there might only be one or two flutists on the panel. It's going to be a lot of other instrumentalists who are going to have a wider range of perspectives. So not just being able to play your excerpts, but really being able to put them in the context of the orchestra, and knowing that if you do make it to the semis or the finals and the conductor or someone else on the panel asks for something different, you've tried it a lot of different ways along with all of those different recordings so that you can be malleable. While a lot of the big orchestras are definitely looking for people who are going to like be this presence and be this shining star and put a defining stamp on it, many other orchestras really want someone who is going to be able to be malleable and fit into a conductor or an orchestra or a wind section's vision. So being able to have that skill, especially in an audition, can really make a big difference in the outcome. So those are all things to think about.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you so much. Good perspective from somebody who would really know, a true expert. That's really wonderful. Thank you. So just kind of maybe almost on a similar track here. So someone like yourself who has a successful and established career, I'm just wondering personally, how do you set musical goals for yourself, in your practice or in auditions or whatever you may do? When you reach the level of accomplishment that you have, how do you continue to set goals for yourself or move forward in some kind of way?
Well, I just always want to be a better flutist and a better musician today than I was yesterday. And sometimes that means doing a lot of woodshedding in the practice room. And sometimes that means doing less and going and experiencing life. I often tell my students that you need to have enough life experiences to draw on. That if you're going to play music that expresses all sorts of human emotions, but you haven't lived those emotions and you haven't lived those experiences, if you don't have enough books and movies and places and experiences that can fuel your own inner imagination library, then you can't possibly share that with others. So if I'm trying to be a better musician today than yesterday, maybe that means I do an extra page of etude. Maybe that means I go and find a new place in nature to go run and see something beautiful that's going to fill my soul up. So I'm always trying to be better than I was yesterday. And sometimes that takes a lot of different tacts. I would say that another way that I'm always trying to move forward is that a lot of what I do as a soloist is that I do a lot of new music. And so let's see, in November, I'm going to give 3 world premieres that have all been written since the pandemic started. So I think that every time I collaborate with a new living composer who's got a new viewpoint, and every time I have a piece that's literally fresh on the page, that makes me a better flutist. There's so much to be said, like we just talked about in orchestral audition scenarios, with listening to recordings and doing score study and making informed interpretive choices. But nothing pushes you forward as a musician in real understanding than coming to a piece that there is no recording, there is no reference. It's just you, your mind, your feelings, the composer, your instrument, and what's on the page. And you have to find a way to really make that speak to others through your instrument to the audience. And so I find that new music always pushes me forward. So that's definitely always one of my goals, to be helping to grow our repertoire of flute music for the 21st century, and continue to push myself forward through that journey.
That's awesome. And congratulations. That's very exciting that you have these things coming up, even given these challenging times. If our viewers would want to be able to hear any of the recordings, is there a way they'd be able to find those when those premieres happen?
Absolutely. So the premieres, that's going to be an event. I call it a new world, and it's going to be a very interesting thing. So I'm going to first play the Then there's going to be a little interview with the composer about the piece. And then you're going to hear the piece again while watching the score so that you can deepen your understanding of the piece based on what you learned from the composer and actually seeing the music. So you get a fresh perspective and then an informed perspective. So that will be available in November on my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/Lindsay Goodman Flutist, and on my YouTube page, which is youtube.com/Lindsay Goodman Fans.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, I'll make very cool. So I think we kind of already talked about a little bit kind of your philosophy or advice on organizing practice time. So I'm going to skip one question I had that's a smidge redundant. But if you don't mind, I'd love to pick your brain on just one more flute
Of course.
So for sure, I mean, I've heard you play. You have a very gorgeous, very big tone. And I was just wondering, do you have any like kind of go-to rules of thumb for, all right, these things must be there for a good flute tone? Like, what are your philosophies?
Well, I have a lot of philosophies on flute tone. Some are universal and some are individual to different players because, of course, we're all made somewhat differently. But I do have a couple of exercises that I personally adore and that I teach to most of my students. So, if you don't mind, I just happen to have my lovely Brandon Brothers flute here, and I wouldn't mind demonstrating one of my favorite sound exercises. So I do a lot of new music, and I'm a big believer that extended techniques actually can make us much better at our traditional flute playing. So one of my favorite exercises is singing and playing, and I've loosely adapted it from one of Robert Dick's exercises. And so one of the things I like to do is I take T&G, Tafnau and Gobert #1, and just pick your favorite key of the day and play the first 9 notes. So I'm going to do D major today. After that, I'm going to sing those same notes on the syllable oo, and I like to do it still in my flute, moving my fingers so I can hear the intonation. Ooh. And then put it together with singing and playing, of course. Which is excellent for ear training and intonation, and also is great for throat tuning. Then go back and play it just on the notes, and you'll hear that now your throat is tuned to those notes, and it's going to be more resonant. And it literally is, right? So I proved the rule after talking and then I both use that in my warm-ups and use it for students. And it's also my favorite thing to do when I'm having a bad tone day. Because often when we're having one of those bad tone days, we feel, oh, it must be my embouchure, it must be my air. And I'm a big believer that most of our tone actually comes from inside our bodies. So if I can fix it with throat tuning and take all of the small muscles outside out of the equation, well, then I've just bypassed dry lips or dry mouth or bad humidity, and I've made it better from inside myself. So play it first, sing it on oo, sing and play it, go back to playing it on your favorite T&G #1, and thank you, Robert Dick, for letting me take that exercise.
That's actually really interesting. I've never heard of the concept of throat tuning before. And now that you say it, that makes a lot of sense, but I've never encountered that. And I've never thought about it in those terms. I think probably most of us at least have thought about it in terms of how open am I, or, is my air warm here? But I never went deeper than that. So that's really cool. I'm going to try that too when we get off this today. All right, now, if you don't mind, we thought we'd end in a little bit of a fun way. We want to hit you with a lightning round. So this is going to be a would you rather. Now, the rules for this are very serious. You get very, very little think time. We just need your knee-jerk response. You get this or that, basically, and you have to tell us which one you would pick. So, are you ready?
Ready.
All right, here we go. So, would you rather play flute or piccolo in the orchestra?
Flute.
Flute!
I do have 2 orchestral piccolo contracts, but flute every time.
Can I ask why? Just is it more comfortable or?
I had a teacher once who said that you either had big flute lips or little flute lips. My favorite flute is the alto flute.
The bigger the better.
Yeah. So I do love playing piccolo, and I feel like I've gotten a lot better at it over time, but I'm still always going to be more comfortable on my C flute or even more so on my
I
alto.
should have asked you. I should ask you flute or alto flute. You would have picked alto.
Alto.
Nice. Good. All right. A little off topic now. Coffee or wine?
Wine.
Because, yeah, I understand. Me too, actually.
It's 2020 because it's 2020.
Yes, yes, I agree. Okay. If you could only listen to one of these pieces for the rest of your life, would you pick Carmen Fantasy or the Nielsen Concerto?
Nielsen Concerto.
Interesting. May I ask why?
Um, I really do love the opera Carmen, but the sort of theme and variations virtuosic showpiece has never really been my favorite thing. I teach it a lot because a lot of students really like that sort of material, but I really like meaty standalone storytelling music, and the Nielsen has that in spades.
Got it. Very cool. Okay, cool. So 5K or 10K?
10K.
Oh, you're very brave. I would pick neither.
Well, 5Ks are really fun. I ran a 5K this morning. I ran a 5K yesterday. But I anymore. I do run great distance, so to just run for a half hour feels like okay. That was a nice warm up. What's next?
You are a tough woman. The idea of running for half an hour for me is like that's my limit. Like something better be chasing me. There's no other reason I'm going to be running that long.
Well, actually, 10K is my favorite distance. You do it for about an hour. You can get in a really good place that you can keep pushing yourself fairly fast, and at the end, you're good and tired.
Ugh,
So it's a good feeling.
I'll trust you. If you say so, I believe you. All right. If you could only teach or perform for the rest of your life, which one would you pick?
Oh, that one's really hard. So my gut knee jerk reaction is perform. And I think it's because during this time, it's the thing that we're all missing so much to be in a room with other people, to really complete that triangle of composer and performer and audience and feel the tingle in the air when everyone is having that shared sensation of live music. I miss that so much. That being said, it's my students and my teaching that have really carried me through these last 6 months and have given me so much joy. But for right now, I'll take performing because it's a thing we can't do.
I also understand that's kind of an unfair question. That one's tough because they're both so valuable and different. So, but that makes a lot of sense. All right. If you were going to play in one of these, would you choose a flute quartet or a woodwind quintet?
Ooh, flute quartet. I did have some wonderful woodwind quintet experiences during my degree programs and played with some really wonderful musicians that taught me a lot about orchestral playing. But goodness knows I love my flute quart pandemonium 4 and my wonderful colleagues. It's just a true joy to play with those three ladies.
Beautiful. That's wonderful. All right. So, with or without our wine that we were going to have, would you have white chocolate or dark chocolate with that?
Dark chocolate. I'm sorry, white chocolate isn't chocolate. It's delicious, but it's not chocolate. So yes, for me, the darker the better. Well, and I'm vegan, so pretty much over 70% is my chocolate of choice.
Nice. I like. So that sounds like a good girls' night. Some wine and some dark chocolate.
Absolutely. And actually, Langevin used to say that chocolate was good for the tone.
I believe that. I would totally subscribe to that theory even without testing it. Let's just trust it.
Yeah. So eat some chocolate, do some singing and playing, you're set.
If you insist. I mean, you're the boss, you're the expert, so I trust you. All right. Last but not least, with no other context than this, scales or arpeggios?
Scales. Yeah. Okay. Well, I feel like I did good on the knee jerk responses. Scales for sure. I always talk to my students about the fact that scales are long tones in motion. And if we think about the very basic long tones we do the Moïse half steps from De La Sonorité, right? And then a lot of us do different expansions on those. And so scales are closer to those small intervals, and they allow us to really marry the tone from top to bottom through all of the registers. And so it doesn't matter how fast your scales are going. If you're sitting there with the metronome clicking off at 152 to the 16th note, more power to you. That is still a long tone in motion. Arpeggios are great all on their own because they teach us so much about theory and about chords that come in so handy with intonation and understanding theoretically the music that we play in ensembles. But when it comes to a great warm up and feeling like you're getting your air moving and your tone in gear, there's nothing like a scale.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you so much again for taking some time to sit down with us. It's been really great to get to know you a bit more and to pick your brain to get all this great information. And thank you again to Flute Specialists for hosting us. And we'll see you hopefully for our next Flute Espresso. And thank you so much again, Lindsay.
Thank you, Alyssa.